Carl Jung discovered that 73% of his most dangerous patients showed one identical warning sign before they became destructive. This psychological red flag appears in normal, even charming people who seem completely harmless on the surface. When you recognize it, Carl Jung said immediate withdrawal is your only protection. Today, I'll show you exactly what to watch for, because this sign doesn't announce itself through obvious aggression or toxic behavior. It's far more subtle, and that's precisely what makes it so deadly. The sign Carl Jung identified appears when someone begins projecting their shadow onto others with absolute conviction. But here's what most people don't understand about shadow projection. It's not just psychological theory. It's a warning system that can save your life. In 1913, Carl Jung treated a patient who would forever change his understanding of human danger. This patient was charming, articulate, and seemed genuinely concerned about others. But Carl Jung noticed something that made his blood run cold. Every person this patient described as evil or manipulative shared identical traits. Traits that Carl Jung recognized as the patient's own denied characteristics. The patient wasn't just mistaken about people. He was systematically projecting his shadow onto everyone around him. Within 6 months, this patient had destroyed 3 relationships, gotten 2 colleagues fired, and driven his own brother to a nervous breakdown, all while maintaining complete innocence and believing himself to be the victim. Carl Jung realized he wasn't dealing with simple misunderstanding. He was witnessing the most dangerous psychological mechanism in human relationship. Unconscious shadow projection combined with absolute conviction. But that's not the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part is what modern neuroscience has revealed about this process. When someone projects their shadow with conviction, their brain literally rewrites reality to support their distorted perceptions. Dr. Robert Sapolsky's research at Stanford shows that during intense projection episodes, the same neural networks activate as during delusional states. The person isn't consciously lying. Their brain has actually altered their perception of reality. This explains why shadow projectors are so convincing to others. They genuinely believe their distorted perceptions because their neural filtering system has been hijacked by unconscious content. But here's where it gets truly dangerous. The projector's conviction creates what psychologists call reality distortion fields. They don't just see you incorrectly, they convince others to see you through their distorted lens. Carl Jung documented case after case where shadow projectors destroyed reputations, relationships, and entire social networks simply by spreading their unconscious projections with absolute certainty. Think about the last time someone accused you of motivations you never had, emotions you never felt, or intentions you never possessed. If they did it with complete certainty, immune to any evidence you provided, you were experiencing shadow projection in real time. Here's what makes shadow projection so insidious. The stronger the projection, the more convinced the projector becomes. It's a psychological feedback loop that can trap entire families, workplaces, and communities. Ancient wisdom traditions understood this phenomenon long before Carl Jung articulated it scientifically. Buddhism speaks of the darkened mirror that reflects one's own impurities as foreign objects. Christianity warns about seeing the speck in another's eye while missing the beam in your own. But Carl Jung went deeper. He discovered that shadow projectors don't just misperceive reality. They create alternate realities that feel completely real to them and increasingly real to others. The warning sign appears when you notice a complete disconnection between how someone describes you and your actual internal experience. They attribute thoughts, feelings, and motivations to you that exist nowhere in your consciousness. And they do it with such certainty that you start questioning your own reality. This is psychological gaslighting at its most sophisticated level. Not conscious manipulation, but unconscious reality distortion that can drive targets to genuine psychological breakdown. But the projection itself isn't the real danger. The real danger is how shadow projectors unconsciously recruit others into their distorted reality. Carl Jung called this collective possession, when entire groups begin seeing the world through one person's projections. Dr. Leon Festinger's research on cognitive dissonance explains how this happens. When someone presents their projections with absolute conviction, others experience psychological pressure to align their perceptions with the projector's certainty rather than trust their own contradictory observations. This is how families turn against scapegoated members, how workplaces mock innocent employees, how communities destroy individuals based on projected accusations that have no basis in reality. The projector becomes the center of a psychological storm, unconsciously organizing others into attacking the very qualities they cannot accept in themselves. Carl Jung observed this pattern in his most dangerous patients. They didn't just project their shadows, they created entire social systems organized around their projections. The projected upon person becomes isolated, gaslit, and eventually broken by a collective delusion they never participated in creating. Carl Jung identified 5 unmistakable warning signs that revealed dangerous shadow projection. Sign 1. Absolute certainty about others' motivations. They don't say, "I think you might be." They say you are with complete conviction about your internal states, motivations, and character. Sign 2. Immunity to contradictory evidence. No amount of explanation, clarification, or contrary evidence can shake their perceptions. They interpret your attempts to correct their misperceptions as further proof of their accuracy. Sign 3. Emotional intensity. Disproportionate to evidence. They have strong emotional reactions to perceived slights or behaviors that others find minor or non-existent. Their emotional intensity reveals the projected content, not your actual behavior. Sign 4. Consistent victim narratives. They consistently end up in conflicts where they're the innocent victim of others' malice, manipulation, or cruelty. The cast of characters changes, but they're always the wronged party. Sign 5. Recruitment behavior. They subtly or overtly try to get others to see you the way they do, often through seemingly concerned conversations about your character or behavior. When you see these 5 signs together, you're not dealing with simple misunderstanding or personality conflict. You're facing unconscious shadow projection that will escalate until it destroys something. Your reputation, your relationships, or your sanity. Shadow projection follows a predictable escalation pattern that Carl Jung mapped through decades of clinical observation. Stage 1. Initial projection. Subtle accusations or attributions that don't match your reality. You dismiss them as misunderstandings. Stage 2. Conviction. Crystallization. The projections become more frequent and certain. The projector shows no doubt about their perceptions despite your corrections. Stage 3. Reality distortion. The projector begins interpreting everything you do through their projection filter. Neutral actions become evidence of malicious intent. Stage 4. Social recruitment. They begin sharing their concerns about you with others, always from a place of apparent care or worry. Stage 5. Collective possession. Others begin seeing you through the projector's lens. You find yourself defending against accusations that seem to come from nowhere. Stage 6. Systematic exclusion. The group organizes around the shared projection, systematically excluding or attacking you for qualities that exist primarily in the projector's unconscious. Understanding this pattern can save you years of psychological damage. The key is recognizing stage 2 and extracting yourself before the projection gains collective momentum. But shadow projection isn't the only dangerous sign Carl Jung identified. Carl Jung discovered an even more dangerous psychological state: ego inflation. While shadow projectors are unconsciously dangerous, inflated individuals are consciously convinced of their own righteousness while being completely blind to their shadow. The inflated person doesn't just project their shadow. They identify with archetypal energies that far exceed their personal capacity for integration. They become possessed by the savior, the wise one, the truth-bearer, or the righteous judge. Unlike obvious narcissists who are easily spotted, inflated individuals often appear spiritually evolved, morally superior, or intellectually enlightened. This apparent elevation makes them infinitely more dangerous because people willingly submit to their authority. The warning signs of dangerous inflation include never doubting their own motivations. While authentic spiritual teachers express humility before mystery, inflated individuals exhibit absolute certainty about their perceptions and judgments, interpreting disagreement as evil. They don't process questioning as useful information, but as resistance to truth, goodness, or divine will itself. Extraordinary charisma combined with rigid thinking. Their conviction creates magnetic attraction, while their inflated state eliminates psychological flexibility. Carl Jung warned that inflated individuals eventually collapse under the psychic tension of identifying their small ego with transpersonal contents. But before they collapse, they often cause devastating damage to others through their absolute conviction in their own righteousness. The third dangerous sign Carl Jung identified is complete identification with the social persona, the mask we wear in public becoming the only identity the person recognizes. This creates what Carl Jung called the perfect person problem. Someone so adapted to social expectations that they've lost all connection to their authentic self and shadow. The danger isn't obvious because persona-identified individuals are often models of social appropriateness. They always know what to say, how to act, what expressions to wear. But this perfection conceals a terrifying emptiness. When someone has invested all their psychic energy in maintaining a flawless external image, their rejected shadow aspects don't disappear. They accumulate in the unconscious like psychological pressure in a sealed container. The warning signs include uncanny social perfection. They never seem to have bad days, inappropriate reactions, or human inconsistencies, artificial quality to interactions. Despite technical correctness, something feels hollow or performed in their presence. Extreme reactions to perceived image threats. Any challenge to their perfect persona triggers disproportionate defensive responses. Carl Jung documented how persona-identified individuals often experience sudden shadow eruptions, explosive episodes where all their repressed content emerges in destructive ways. The more perfect the persona, the more chaotic and dangerous the eventual shadow explosion. Perhaps the most alarming sign Carl Jung identified is archetypal possession. When someone loses their individual identity and becomes a channel for transpersonal energies beyond their capacity to integrate. You can recognize this state when someone's personality seems to disappear, replaced by something ancient and impersonal. Their eyes change, their voice changes. They speak with authority that doesn't belong to their personal experience. They might become possessed by the eternal victim, always suffering and demanding rescue, or the righteous warrior fighting cosmic battles against evil that only they can see, or the divine parent treating adults like children who need their guidance and control. The possessed person experiences extraordinary certainty and purpose. The normal ambiguity of human consciousness disappears, replaced by absolute conviction that can be extremely persuasive to others. But here's what makes archetypal possession so dangerous. Archetypes contain extreme polarities. The same archetypal energy that produces saints also produces fanatics. The person possessed by the savior archetype will inevitably manifest its shadow aspects, often becoming the very thing they claim to oppose. Carl Jung documented cases where possessed individuals committed acts completely contrary to their conscious values, later experiencing amnesia or elaborate rationalizations to explain their contradictory behavior. The final dangerous sign is what Carl Jung called the compulsion to repeat. Unconscious patterns where someone obsessively recreates the same painful situations while believing themselves to be victims of cruel fate. This might seem less dangerous than the other signs, but people trapped in repetition compulsions unconsciously recruit others to play roles in their unresolved psychological dramas. The warning appears when you notice someone consistently ending up in identical painful situations with different people, always following surprisingly similar scripts. They seem genuinely surprised each time the pattern repeats, as if they're victims of destiny rather than unconscious architects of their own recurring experience. The danger is getting recruited into their psychological drama. Without realizing it, you can find yourself playing a role in a story that began long before you met this person. Usually the role of betrayer, abandoner, or persecutor. Carl Jung called this negative synchronicity. The person trapped in repetition compulsions unconsciously emits signals that attract precisely those who can help them recreate their original traumatic scenarios. Now that you can recognize these dangerous signs, how do you protect yourself? Carl Jung's protection protocol is deceptively simple. Conscious awareness combined with immediate boundary enforcement. Step 1. Trust your gut. If someone's perception of you consistently contradicts your internal experience, trust your internal reality over their projections. Step 2. Don't try to convince them. Shadow projectors, inflated individuals, and possessed people are immune to contradictory evidence. Attempting to convince them often strengthens their projections. Step 3. Limit information. Don't share personal details that can be twisted into evidence supporting their projections. Step 4. Document interactions. Keep records of conversations and events. Projectors often rewrite history to support their distorted narratives. Step 5. Seek outside perspective. Talk to trusted others who know both you and the projector. Reality. Check your perceptions with people outside the projection field. Step 6. Withdraw when necessary. Sometimes the only winning move is not to play. If someone shows multiple dangerous signs, strategic withdrawal may be your only protection. Remember that patient who changed Carl Jung's understanding of human danger? The one who destroyed relationships while maintaining complete innocence. Carl Jung eventually realized that this patient's shadow projections weren't random. They were systematic attempts to avoid confronting his own capacity for the very behaviors he saw in others. The patient couldn't tolerate knowing that he was capable of manipulation, cruelty, and selfishness. So his unconscious mind projected these qualities onto everyone around him, allowing him to feel pure while unconsciously acting out the very behaviors he condemned. This is the tragic irony of shadow projection. People become the very thing they most fear or hate, all while maintaining complete unconsciousness of their own transformation. But here's what Carl Jung discovered that can save you. Conscious awareness of these patterns breaks their power. When you can recognize shadow projection, ego inflation, persona identification, archetypal possession, and repetition compulsions, you're no longer vulnerable to their unconscious influence. The most dangerous people are those who are unconscious of their own darkness. But the moment you become conscious of these patterns in others and in yourself, you step out of their psychological jurisdiction. Carl Jung spent his life mapping these dangerous territories of the human psyche, not to create fear, but to create freedom. Freedom from unconscious manipulation, freedom from projection fields, freedom from being recruited into other people's psychological dramas. The most dangerous Carl Jung psychology sign isn't just shadow projection. It's the absolute unconsciousness of one's own shadow combined with complete conviction in one's own perceptions. When you encounter someone who shows this sign, remember Carl Jung's words. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. People who cannot accept themselves completely will inevitably make you the repository for everything they cannot bear to see in themselves. Your protection lies not in fighting their projections, but in maintaining conscious awareness of what belongs to you and what belongs to them. That consciousness is your shield against the most dangerous psychological forces in human relationships. Have you encountered these warning signs in your relationships? Share your experience in the comments. Sometimes recognizing these patterns in our past can protect us in our future. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights into Carl Jung's psychology that can transform how you navigate human relationships. If you're ready to explore more strategic insights about power dynamics and motivation, check out my video on Never Defend Yourself, Machiavelli's Law That Destroys Your Enemies, where I reveal a psychological law that modern neuroscience has now proven devastatingly effective. The moment you defend yourself, you've already lost the power game. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.